And we're back, Stripe Show podcast on a Tuesday. I'm your host, Travis Fulton. Thank you for making us part of your day. Big day in the world of professional golf. Not only are the guys in Memphis sweating and getting ready for some FedEx Cup playoffs. It's the FedEx St. Jude Championship. That's where we kick it off this week. We'll be breaking that down. But also it's a big day off the golf course as we go to court. LIV PGA Tour, probably the first court date of many over the next couple years. And there's one guy to just talk all things golf, both on and off, and that's Mr. Will Haskett. How you doing, buddy?
I am great. I already have the meat sweats thinking about a week in Memphis. So there's nothing better than 5 pounds of barbecue the night before and then figuring out a way to sweat all that out of your pores in 90 and humidity the day after. So it's always a good week. Let's go.
I've said this many times. I am a big fan of TPC Southwind, and I am excited that it's getting a bigger stage with this because I think it's a great course, which we'll get to, and we'll break it down and give our audience who we're looking at this week as 125 guys are there, and they'll narrow it down to 70, of course, and they'll go to Delaware, Wilmington Country Club, and then they'll go down to 30, and it'll be in Atlanta there at Eastlake. But before we get to that, there's a big thing happening in the courtroom today as, of course, this antitrust lawsuit has been filed between these 11 players. And in the short term of that, because this antitrust lawsuit is going to stretch out for a period of time, but in the short term, there's this emergency relief that is being addressed today in the courtroom. Now, Will and I are coming on. It's 1 o'clock East Coast time. This ruling is going to happen after we completely give you our thoughts here on this ruling. But basically, you have Hudson Swassard, you have Taylor Gooch, and you have Matt Jones who want to play this week. Emergency relief.
Yep.
There's been harm. There's been harm done.
They're damaged.
Right, as they've went to LIV. And it's going to be interesting to see what transpires. What do you think? Is it a 50-50 deal, or are you leaning one way?
Yeah, I'm not leaning one way or the other, to be honest with you. I mean, I think I've, in many public spaces, have sort of made my opinions on not necessarily this special injunction for these three individual players, but the idea of what the guys are going to live feel like, whether they're being transparent with us when they talk about what they're going for and jumping for. But I think if I'm not a lawyer, I'm not an antitrust lawyer, I don't have even a bit of an interest in antitrust law to begin with. Like, I think there are other areas of law that I'm probably more of a couch lawyer, an armchair lawyer, I guess, if you would say, in certain things. It's definitely not this one. And so when I read both of the sides of it, I think that both sides obviously have compelling information here. It really just kind of comes down to the judge and how she interprets this and how the court looks into it. And if you read all the stories, LIV has done their strategic homework in all of this, and that they're filing this in California. They're doing it in very much the same playbook and mold that the NIL stuff kind of started and then snowballed to where we are now in college athletics. And that, didn't take very long, which is very much in a pro athlete sort of mindset. I think that's what they're trying to do, is get to a pro individual, the person who's bringing in the money, pro athlete, judge, court system, state, however you want to sort of look at it. And I think that there's two great compelling arguments. I mean, even if you go broadly to say Phil Mickelson as one of the 11 in the bigger lawsuits, he's a lifetime member of the PGA Tour. Like, he has earned the right to be called a lifetime member of the tour. And so will a judge hear that and see that and be like, yes, you can't tell him that he can't play? Or in the case of these three who have accrued the appropriate number of points, is their being suspended by the PGA Tour justifiable in a judge's eye to the rules of the PGA Tour? Or is there enough for a wrong being done to these three individuals that they should be allowed access to play this week? And I think, it's great lawyering at that point in time. Like, I could make an argument to you, if you picked one side, I could pick the other and argue against it. What do I think is the best for golf? What do I think is the best for this whole situation? I'd probably side with my own opinions on the PGA Tour side. And I thought that they made an actually pretty compelling argument against these guys of, they've known for months that they're suspended. Why are they waiting until the very last minute to create an emergency hearing? Because they know it's probably their best chance of playing this week. If they had gone to the courts 2 months ago, there was probably a a stronger chance that they don't win a long-term battle and don't get to play. And so by getting a special injunction, they're really not hearing the case. They're just pleading their case that they should be able to play in the interim. So I think the PGA Tour did a good job of pointing that out. And they've done a good job of pointing out too, it's like, how have they truly been wronged? They've gone and they've played in all three of these cases. They've played 3 golf tournaments where they all made ridiculous sums of money. I don't know what they made off the course in terms of signing bonuses to make the jump over if they're only playing for the tournament purses. But at a bare minimum, and I haven't looked up in advance of this podcast what they actually finished and what they made, I can easily do the math in my head that they made at least $360,000 because that's 3 times last place in all 3 of those events. So you can't say that their earnings have been detrimentally hurt by the PGA Tour saying they can't play golf. And so I would say if I was the judge hearing this case, that I would probably side with the PGA Tour just because I liked that argument that I've seen and the stuff that's been leaked out from the documents, are not leaked out, but been made publicly available in those documents. But I also think in the long term, the players have a bit of a case here as well. And if the judge wants to err on the side of the individual and not on the side of the big organization in a short-term injunction standpoint, I could easily see them making the decision that those 3 players get to play this week. And if they do, it'll be must-see TV when they show up on the range because they're 3 nice guys. I mean, again, these aren't 3 guys that I think really draw a lot of ire from guys on the PGA Tour, but it's got to be a really interesting conversation for that whole, Georgia mafia of guys. Hudson Swafford shows up and how Kisner or any of those guys are talking to them about the situation. It's probably pretty chummy, but at the same point in time, it's a little weird, right? Like you sued us to get back here to be able to play. Like you made your choice, and we've seen more players sort of take that stance. So it'll be really interesting. So if I was making the ruling, I'd probably side with the tour, but my gut instinct says that these 3 are going to be allowed to play this week.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I think they will. Most of the time when you have that bigger overarching lawsuit, then you have the emergency underneath, like you just kind of let it be status quo. And so I think they will play as well. And man, I would love to be in that locker room. Yeah, I'd love to be a fly on the wall because I guarantee you there's going to be some words said, and there should be. Look, if I was a PGA Tour member and I'm elected to stay, and I have buddies like Kevin, or I think Kevin Kisner mentioned that, I hung out with HUD, last week, and you kind of tell it was a little bit different, but we're still friends and this and that. And hey, if my buddies elected to go over there and play and get the money, man, more power to you. I'm going to stay here. But now you're coming back here and you're interrupting what we're doing here. Oh, and you're suing us, and you're going to, come on now.
That's the difference.
Let's draw the line somewhere. You just can't walk all over us. So yeah, there's going to be some words said, and this is the first step and probably the first words that are going to be said for some period of time. As Daniel Rappaport said yesterday on the podcast, there's probably been some group texts that have went silent in the last few days.
Totally.
Which I think sums it up really well. Anyway, let's move on. I'm excited for the playoffs. I am. Anytime you can get the best players together playing, and I know we're missing a few, but I like the playoffs. I like Southwind.
Sure.
And of course, Fedex has done so much for the PGA Tour. And we go here at 125 players, and we've got the big boys there, of course, Rory and JT and others. And, they're comfortably in. They'll be moving on into the top 70 and down the road. But when I think of Southwind, I've been there, Will, a couple times, and I've played it.
Yep.
And when I think of Southwind, I think of, okay, it's fairly demanding off the tee. Like there's definitely a premium of getting the ball in the fairway. These guys are going to miss probably more fairways here than on average. I think these greens are interesting that, they're relatively small, but they also got some undulations. So these complexes that they put them in, I think they're difficult to get to. I think you'll see guys missing a lot of greens, but I don't think the short game is all that challenging around the greens. I think it's pretty straightforward for them as far as around the greens. But then I do think the greens fast, this champion Bermuda green that they'll be facing. So, guys don't go typically that low here. Abraham Answer won here at 16, JT 13, Koepka 16. You're going to see a lot of water balls. I think at TPC Southwind, these guys are going to be hitting the ball in the water a lot. It's penal.
Yep.
So you got to keep it out of the water. I think you got a little premium and keeping in the fairway. You got to work it into these green complexes. And of course, making some putts always helps too. I miss anything? TPC Southwind, when you think and you look back on this tournament.
No, I mean, you probably have even gone beyond what I would say about the golf course, to be honest with you. I mean, it is about as true of a second shot golf course as there is in the entire PGA Tour
Yeah, I like
rotation. I
that.
mean, it is all about irons. You have a
Mhm.
heavy dose or an above average number of approach shots from really 150 all the way up to 225.
Yep.
The greens are so pure. This is a golf course that used to be bent grass, and then they obviously changed to Bermuda 15 years ago now. It's been a long time since that switch, and it completely changed the golf course. It went from being like we've seen much of the summer where it's hot and you just can't keep, a bent grass green from being soft and receptive to, okay, we can get these things going 13 and a half some
Yeah.
summers, bouncing. And it's a true second shot golf course. And I'll never forget. I mean, I was with Justin when he won 2 years ago, and he won the entire golf tournament losing strokes gained putting for the week, which just doesn't happen. It
Right.
rarely happens. Maybe it's happened a handful of times since I've been out here doing golf for 10 years on the PGA Tour. And so it is truly a second shot golf course. And so it's one of those weeks, Travis, where, I mean, unless you're playing really bad, it's who are our irons horses? Like, who are the guys that we just truly believe in when it comes to iron play? Because most of those guys are typically pretty accurate off the tee as well, which means they're going to put themselves into decent positions, or they're good drivers of the golf ball, I guess you would say. Like a Colin Morikawa, pretty straightforward sort of cut. Doesn't beat it off the tee, but doesn't really matter. Doesn't have to beat it off the tee. JT's really good through the entire bag, but, his superpower is his iron game, which is why he's been so successful on this golf course. So yeah, to me, it's an absolute pure second shot golf course. So my eyes just start floating towards strokes gained approach, which is great because if you've been tracking week in and week out, we really haven't had a second shot golf course for a while. We've had a lot of first shot golf courses, a lot of putting contests over the last couple of weeks, a lot of courses where the driver really comes into play. I guess last week was a bit of a second shot, but it's really more an accuracy course and then attack from there. And this week, you certainly don't want to be in the rough, but it is all about who do I trust with the irons right now.
Yeah, I don't think the rough's too penal. I've been reaching out there on
not
site.
Like last week.
Not like last week. Yeah, that was said a couple times. Like, yeah, definitely not like last week. Playable, got to read the lies, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, your typical. Yeah. But, 150, 175 yards on in, approach shots. You start looking at last 100 rounds. Guess who's number one? JT. Sung JM is number two. Interesting. Nice week last week. Steven Yeager, number 3. Henley, Munoz, Homa, Hatton, Schauffele. Those are some names that pop up. You go to 175 to 200. You got Hoagie, Hovland, Morikawa, Liss, Lowry, Finau, Berger. No surprise. He kind of likes this place. Adam Spensman, my boy. So those are, some of the approach shots. You look at par 4 scoring. Only 2 par 5s here on this golf course. Rory, Rahm, JT, Cantlay, Lowry. So you can see JT's name, certainly popping up a decent amount here.
Yeah.
That iron game. Getting into it. You look at the odds opening here. McIlroy, he's got the nod. He's 9-1. JT 14. Okay. Cantlay 14. Fitzpatrick 14. Scheffler 14. Schauffele 14. And rumor has it Cameron Smith heading up the Australian team, perhaps at Live. He's at 18-1. Speaking of good iron play, Cameron Smith's iron play is drastically improved over the last 3 or 4 years. You go up top there, you really can't go wrong with any of those guys, can you?
No, you can't. I mean, Cameron Smith probably should have won this golf tournament last year, and he chose to hit driver off of 18T and nearly put it in someone's backyard, which made zero sense. And then tried to hit a hero shot from out of there also, and it was just kind of a crazy situation for him. So, I mean, yeah, you're right. You can't go wrong with any of them. What I typically look at this time of the year, Travis, is who's trending. So who do I like? Who's kind of on a heater going into the playoffs? And then who also maybe has that little bit of, I guess, motivation would be the thing that I would look at in all of this. And that is there anybody that hasn't achieved something this year that a playoff push is going to have value for? Like, that little tiny extra bit of motivation. So, when Rory made the run in the FedEx Cup a couple of years ago, hadn't had a great major season, found a little form late, and then sort of parlayed that into winning it. He did win the Players early in the year, but if it's Cameron Smith and the year that he has had and the meteoric rise that he has sort of had, and he's a Players champion, he's an Open champion, and now knowing that there's going to be a whole lot of noise around him for the next 48 hours before he tees it up, there's going to be a lot of questions, both on the record and off the record to him. I think it's an easy sort of guy to stay away from a little bit just because we've achieved so much. So when I look at like the motivating guys and I looked at, say, guys in terms of the last 20 rounds in terms of overall form, a guy that's up there is Xander Schauffele. He's played great golf this summer. He was playing good golf prior to the last couple of months. He's played really good golf, sort of woke up the last couple of months. He's also number one in the field last 20 rounds in strokes gained approach. So I add those up, and like he's kind of my guy at the top of the board that I really like from that favorite pool because he fits that model, right? Playing really good, irons are really good. And unlike everybody else that have he's got wins. He had one of the hottest stretches. He obviously, won in that sort of place, but like the big win that Xander kind of has in his eyes could end up being the FedEx Cup playoffs. And so who gets off to that big start and puts themselves in position to have one of those leads going into East Lake in a couple of weeks? And keep in mind too, we've got sort of the unknown of what next week is going to be like in Wilmington. And so you don't have a golf course that you can necessarily get ready for or say, hey, I can't wait to go attack that place because we just don't know. It's such an unknown. So yeah, Xander's kind of the guy that catches my attention. And then a lot of the guys that you mentioned that maybe even played last week and we saw form from who fit this golf course and are riding heaters right now. A Russell Henley, great iron play, 2 good weeks in a row. Sung Jae, even Scott Stallings, who was one of my dark horses. I had Sung Jae and Scott Stallings to win last week. And Sung Jae I thought was going to get it done going into the final round. And Scott just had a really bad second round and had to play catch up. And I think just missed out on a top 10, but he's been playing absolute great golf. Good fit for him. Home state Tennessee guy. Iron play has been really good too. So it's like those are some of the solid guys that I feel like can make a little bit of a push and rise up the standings from that top tier. I like Xander this week. And I think this is the year of Rory to be the face of the PGA Tour. Right. You have to expect that we're going to see greatness from Rory in these playoffs at some point in time. Maybe it's this week. I don't know. I don't think it's the best golf course for Rory, which is why I'm shading away from him. But I think we're going to see something big from him next week and probably in Atlanta.
Yeah, I think to go on the narrative of who's inspired, right, to prove something right now, I think obviously Rory is carrying the torch right now. We've seen that. We know JT can play this place, but I think is who's playing the best. I mean, it's tough to look past Xander, obviously, and then as we continue down the odds, it's tough to look past Tony Finau. Both of those guys, I've been fairly critical of on this podcast, and particularly down the stretch. And they've showed us something. They have, to me at least, they've taken the next step. They're putting tournaments away. They're starting to look a little more comfortable.
Sure.
On a Sunday. So it feels like a Xander run could continue here. Certainly a Tony Finau run. Tony Finau's playing some really good golf right now.
Yep.
John Rahm has not had a good year. He's at 20. And when you start talking about second shot golf courses and for something to prove, I mean, this is Will Zalatoris' place, isn't it? At 22,
it is, and
not a putting contest. This is made for him.
It is made for him. The caddy change, mid-tournament last week, and then quickly saying that he already had Joel Stock sort of in the wings, ready to go for the playoffs. So that was definitely not a spur of the moment. On Friday night, we decided to make a caddy change. It just something happened, and that was the catalyst mid-tournament. So I think there's definitely something to prove there. He's fired up. He's upset that he hasn't played the winning type of golf. And let's not forget, Cameron Young can end up being a factor in this one. Again, he's got really good measurables, but it's more the driver. I think I would lead towards him being as elite with the driver as Will is with the irons, even though both of them are elite with the other club. But you're right. If it's a second shot golf course and I'm picking between those two guys that haven't found a way to win yet this week, I would definitely pick a guy like Will Zalatoris. And I do feel like the little bit of noise last week, which he handled, by the way, beautifully. I mean, everything was, you couldn't have handled the situation for as awkward as it was mid-tournament better than he did. And I've defended him in a couple of different interviews since. People are like, what's the deal there? And I said, well, if we take him at his word and I've seen their relationship, then that they made that decision and it was a team decision and we move on. But you're right. It's a week where I think he can really prove a lot with that. And you know what? We say all of those names and guess who we haven't mentioned at all? And it's the guy that we haven't mentioned at all year. And he won 4 times, including a major, and became number 1 in the world. Like, we're going to hear from Scotty Scheffler at some point in time in these playoffs. We probably will hear from Sam Burns, and they're probably going to be paired together at the President's Cup. If you're sort of, reading all the tea leaves there too. I think those two guys are as much a face of the future of the PGA Tour as anybody. And yet we still don't have a really good way of working them into our narratives because we don't really know exactly where they fit. They've become such good all-around players, Travis, that when we go to a place like Memphis, it's like, oh yeah, Zalatoris, Thomas, Colin Morikawa with the irons. And we never really get into how about the two guys that won a combined 7 times this season and don't do anything wrong? You know, I mean, like,
Yep.
how do we shove them into our lineups or into our picks, because they could win on any golf course because that's how good they are.
Yeah. You know, Scotty was what, 14th here last year. And look, it's not a putting contest. I think if you had to be hypercritical, Scheffler's putter can get chilly a little bit from time to time. What's impressed me the most with Scheffler is his iron game. That was the one question mark for me coming out. How elite is his iron game? We knew he could drive the ball.
Yeah.
We knew his short game was good.
Yep.
But how elite was his iron game? Well, it's proved out to be pretty damn elite. Now, Burns, I can wrap my arms more around Burns coming up because I've always thought he's a great iron player, and he's a great putter. So it's like, okay.
Well, he was a driver putter guy early, and then
that boded well.
Added the irons, right? So it's like all of a sudden he went from being, can really move it off the tee and could putt, which you'll make a lot of money these days, hitting it a long ways and putting. And then all of a sudden in the last, 18 months, he's become a top 20, top 25 type iron player. And that's when the switch has been flipped.
Well, and his short game has improved. So I give him credit for that. I think his short game was a little clunky when he came out. But when I'm looking at a player coming out on the PGA Tour, and this is why, like last year, we had Cameron Young on the podcast. Mm-hmm. And it was like, look, not only is he winning on the Korn Ferry Tour, but this game that you're looking at right here, it will transfer everywhere to the PGA Tour. And Mito Pereira, like we're talking about these guys as they're coming on. It's like these guys will compete right away because they're long enough, great iron players, and they can putt. Their short game, all right, okay, but I'll sacrifice a little short game. Now, if you become an elite short game player like Scotty Scheffler, now all of a sudden off you go and you're winning major championships and those kinds of things. So I'm not surprised by Sam Burns at all. I'm not surprised by Mito and how he's contended. I am a little surprised in the consistency of Cameron Young. Not that he would show signs, but the consistency that this guy, I almost feel like Cameron Young is a household name. Will, I really do already on the PGA Tour.
I do. And I've said, I think he gets to the winner's circle before Zalatoris does. I said
it
4 or 5 months ago before
Agreed.
he even rattled off a couple more top threes and was sort of contending because look, as much as Will has erased doubts in the biggest tournaments when it comes to that putting stroke, I still get the heebie-jeebies watching a couple of those short ones last week at Wyndham when that putter went every direction on the compass before it got all the way back to making contact with the golf ball. And while Young's putting numbers are good, and they're certainly better than Will Zalatoris, it's also a stroke that I can kind of believe in. And so he's been viable in non-majors as well as in majors, where it seems that Will has this inner ability, this great competitive drive and fortitude to be able to compete on the toughest courses against the toughest fields. But yet Cameron Young's showing up and he's competing against whatever the field is every week. Doesn't matter what the golf course is, what the setting is, he's showing up and he's finding a way to compete. And I just feel like the law of averages at this stage of the game dictate that we're going to see him in more opportunities to win than Will does, and he gets it done. And maybe it's a playoff event. I mean, again, at this point in time, it wouldn't surprise me if one of those guys gets their first win in a super marquee event. Because here's the point: like now they're going to be playing in marquee events. They're going to be playing in, elevated now giant purse events. They're going to be playing in the playoffs. They're going to be playing in majors, and they're going to win one of them as their first win, which is just kind of crazy to think about because you just don't see that story play out like that anymore.
Yeah, I said Young would win before Will as well. And boy, Will has been very close and Cameron has been very close. They've been impressive. They've both been right there. Will Zalatoris has grown on me this year off the course. You talk about Rory and carrying the flag. I can tell you, Will's right there with him. Like he's right behind him. He's been vocal, and I think he's handled himself well. He's articulated his feelings well. I think Will Zalatoris he is a face of the PGA Tour, and just from his story, last year. But now Cameron Young being already a face, that's been surprising to me on how consistent he's been. And you certainly got to look at him. I think there's certainly some question marks around Morikawa and Hovland as we work down here. And I'll just rattle off some names. And then you can give me who you're looking at here. Morikawa's 30, Burns 35, Matsuyama 35, M 35. I like Sungjae here as well. I thought Sungjae was impressive last week. Lowry 35, Hovland 35. And we'll go two more. Billy Horschel at 40, and then the young kid. How impressive was he last week? Tom Kim at 40-1. I mean, he pars the first hole of the tournament. He wins by 9 for crying out loud. This kid He snuck up on us. He snuck up on me a little bit. I'll be honest. I mean, we were talking about him, but for him to be that good last week, that impressive, that dominant, that's a big statement.
4 over through 1 and then 24 under the final 71 holes or whatever it was. I mean, it's ridiculous. Now, I do think that there has to be a bit of a hangover on 1 week from that. I mean, you're 20 years old. You've been just sort of running on full momentum and adrenaline over the last couple of weeks. And you saw how he really even couldn't come up with the words to describe what it meant to be in that moment. And there just has to be a natural exhale of the body, and gets to go up against an absolute elite field now too, which I think minimizes stuff. And look, he had the chops. He probably could have won in Scotland at the Scottish Open. So it's not like he hasn't gone up against a pretty decent field in terms of it. But at the very tippy top of this one, I mean, we typically see cream rise to the top. And this is a golf course where, again, like it's not, no offense to say Boston, where we had big names win, but it was such a birdie fest there that I don't think it allowed separation from elite guys from the rest of the field. And I think this is a golf course where when you get this many good players on it, that you typically get elite talent rising to the very tippy top. And it's not to say Tom Kim is an elite talent. He's proven that at 20 years old, he is and is going to continue to get better and become an elite talent. But I think right now, you know, you've got 15 guys ahead of him probably in the actual betting markets, and a dozen of those guys are playing good enough golf right now that it's like, you know what, head to head on a big boy golf course like this one where you really got to hit shots, I'll take them over Tom Kim right now. But that might change in a year.
Sure. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Morikawa's missed 3 of his last 4 cuts.
Yeah, it hasn't been a good year.
Hovland, no, he hasn't. Hovland has, it's interesting watching Hovland to me because I'm, my trade from an instruction standpoint, I know he's changed his technique a ton around the greens, and statistically, he just continues to go backwards. He's just still not getting any better around the greens. Now, you can perhaps look past that a little bit on this course, but I'm going to probably stay away there as we work down into 50-1. I think Tyrrell Hatton's finally found his groove here, folks. I mean, I'm playing Hatton. I think there's a guy, when you look at recent form coming in, 24th at the Genesis, 11th at the Open, 8th at the Wyndham. Tyrrell Hatton is starting to look a little bit like he used to, or that whole game's kind of coming together. I made comment about Tyrrell earlier this year. It's like one of those, like, we can all relate to when we play golf. It's like, man, I hit the ball good, but I can't make a putt. And then I'm making a putt and I can't hit the ball. Yeah. And then I'm hitting the ball good and I got behind a tree and I got a bad. And it's like, it's always something. It's like, I just can't quite get it all together. What do I got to do to put this thing? We can all relate to that. And I think Tyrrell's finally putting it together right now. I think he's playing his best golf. I have played Tyrrell Hatton at 50-1, and he's also joined by at 50. Stand by. There's Homa, 50-1, and Neiman and Henley. Russell Henley, you've already mentioned 50-1. Russell Henley, statistically, is the best player on paper without wins.
Yes.
Right? Without wins. Yes. I mean, you look at Russell Henley on paper, you're like, oh, damn right, we're playing him at 50, right? Yeah. I mean, how can you not play him at 50-1? Looking at him statistically on paper. He's the number one, I think, and usually he oftentimes is strokes gained approach. I think last 50 rounds coming in, and if he's not 1, he's 2. I mean, he's damn lasers off the,
Yeah, and it's even a smaller sample size than even like your Hatton one, right? Like if I go, I like last 20 rounds sometimes, right? But if you've missed a couple of cuts in that actually extends that back out a little bit farther. So if you're looking last 12 rounds, then Henley and Hatton are near the top of the board when it comes to their iron play and everything. And so it can easily sort of skew when you are getting into those numbers. The thing that's crazy to me about Russell Henley is when he came out on the PGA Tour, he was a top 10, top 20 putter. And he then like lost the ability to putt, but then figured out how to become one of the great ball strikers of the last 3 or 4 years. He hasn't gained in a tournament strokes gained putting since the Masters. So you have to go back to early April, the last time Russell Henley gained on the greens in a tournament. And he lost barely, is fractionally. He lost on the greens last week, but he finished T5, which is insane. I mean, it's kind of like Will Zalatoris numbers, for a while there too. Like a guy who's top 5, top 7, and yet is losing on the greens. So if this week, I think this is an easier week to putt than last week. I think these greens are more manageable. I think they're a bit more straightforward. than the greens at Wyndham because you don't have some of the Ross ridges and the back to front severities and things that make those greens a little bit more difficult. So yeah, again, I think because you shift away from worrying about the putter as much, and those greens last week were pure and they're super fast, and this week they'll be probably purer and maybe just as fast, then is that enough? Because typically we see really good non-undulating or not super undulating Bermuda greens. Those to me are the surfaces where, okay, let's ride all of our guys who we don't trust as putters because they always end up being the easiest ones, to be able to putt on. So yeah, I like it this week. I mean, I think Russell Henley was a very popular play last week, and I don't think he will be as popular this week because of the name recognition that's in there. But if there's a guy that comes from that pack that isn't a household name, then yeah, Russell Henley makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I'm going to play him as a top 20, and I'm also going to play Seamus Power as we work down as a top 20. You got Aaron Wise, who will get some play at 65, knocking on the door. Corey Connors 65, and then Power and Bezadenhut. So Power's 65, Bezadenhut's 80, and I'm going to play Power. I'm going to look past the miscut. About a month ago at the Open, we haven't seen him since. Before that, 25th at the Travelers, 12th at the U.S. Open. I think Seamus Power has really, I think his iron game has gotten better. And I think he does end up with the putter. He's one of those players that, he's not going to wow you with one part of his game consistently, but it's all kind of like right there, slightly above average. Sure. But I see the approach game, I think, he checks out nicely there, and I like that. And then he can give you that +5 putting, and he can give you that +4 putting like he did at the Players, +5 putting at the Byron. He likes Bermuda surfaces. I think this is a good spot for Power as we work down the board in a top 20, right? Sure. As we start getting some odds now. I said Bezadenhut. Now quickly we're into the hundreds. Bradley. I think Ches Reevy's going to get some looks here. Reevy's played well here at Southwind over the years at 100-1. Adam Scott 100-1. Kirk has cooled off a little from his play this summer at 100-1. I'm always a Taylor Pendrith fan, 100-1. Don't know if this is a good spot for him though. Any names as we get to these hundreds that are of interest to you? JT Poston's 100. Harold Varner. Whoa. Davis Riley 100. Man, it was just like 2 months ago. He was like 35, wasn't it?
Big fields, but we saw something from Davis Riley last week, which was nice. So after he took about a month off, he wasn't the same player when he came back. So maybe that was just him knocking the rust off. And so I think there's probably some value in Davis Riley. If that far down the board, then the numbers can be pretty good at a top 20 for him. And we've seen his propensity to finish top 20, even top 10s in some big tournaments against some big fields. I mean, he was viable at Memorial this year, and I thought that was a golf course that might be a bit too big for him to be able to do it. I mean, some of my favorite value plays, we actually mentioned Steven Yeager earlier. I love the familiarity of the area, the numbers, the trends, the fact that because this is a playoff event that he's going to come in, and I'm assuming, I don't have all of the odds in front of me right now. I'm assuming there's going to be some incredible value. I'm not saying he's going to win the golf tournament, but you're going to get really good DFS value, if not even top 40 positive action on a guy like him this week, which I think is good to sort of balance out the lineups a little bit. And then a guy that I think becomes a favorite to a lot of people for his ball striking, but is finally sort of trending up, and I think is playing his best golf at the right time entering the playoffs. We've gotten 2 runner-up finishes, a miscut at the Open, but the putting and the iron numbers were good there. It was just sort of the stuff around the green. Emiliano Grillo is swinging well above his season average this year, and that's an absolute ball striking Jesse right there. And we've even seen some stuff out of the putter. So to have 2 runner-ups in the last couple of months, I think this is an even better course fit than either TPC Deer Run or TPC Twin Cities, where he had those runner-ups. And I understand it's a way better field than those 2 sort of weak events when it comes to it, but you're going to get really good value down the, I mean, I think he's just above 7,000. He might be 7,100 in DFS, I think, on DraftKings this week. And then, I mean, from a top 20,
50-1 to win.
Yeah, I mean, so that means at top 20, you're getting probably 5-1, 6-1 on a top 20 for Grillo this week. I mean, that's pretty good number right there for a guy that has 2 runner-ups.
Plus 500.
Yeah,
I like that too. Yeah, he was someone I circled early. As I do Alex Smalley quite often. He's a young player, the high ceiling for me that I think as you start looking down this board. I pulled up a stat here I want to share. I went to TPC Southwind. Now, some of these tournaments were back in the WGC days, but just looking at last 50 rounds, TPC Southwind in the field, right? Guys that have played this.
Sure.
Obviously, Daniel Berger likes this place. I mean, he's number one.
He's not playing though,
Reevy's number 2.
So you got a problem there. So no Berger.
Right. So Berger, who I know is not playing, but he's, obviously he's number 1 for a reason. He loves his play. But Reevy is 2.
Wow.
Webb Simpson's 3.
Yeah.
Where's Webb at in his game? Horschel 4.
Interesting.
Trey Mullinax, he's only played a few times here though. McElroy 16 times. JT, obviously. Stallings, there's your boy. He's up there in the top 10. He likes TPC Southwind. Seamus Powers in the top 10. Will Zalatoris has played 4 times here. Matsuyama likes it here. So gosh, I've kind of been riding the Scott Stallings train too, and been doing okay. When he turned it around is when he was on the podcast. By the way, for the record, he was on the podcast, and since that day, he was a great guest. He was a great guest, by the way. He's been playing lights out.
Yeah,
so we feel like we have a little bit to do with that.
I like course history. I think course history matters on this golf course, especially because of how tricky and challenging it is. I think if you had to weigh it in terms of where it is to current form, it's probably like a quarter of the emphasis that you sort of put into it. But I love it when anytime we've mentioned somebody, I feel like you build your list, right? You build your strategy, and then you cross-reference those players you like with course history. And if there's something that just stands out, missed 4 out of 5 cuts, then you kind of go back and you reevaluate. But it's really gratifying to hear you rattle off some names that we were already sort of talking about and be like, yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I would expect that guy to be really good in this golf course.
Yeah, and you start looking down here, and there's Webb, who I mentioned, 130 to 1. Sahith Theegala, who's popped 130 to 1. And then Mito 130. I mean, I'm going to play Mito top 20. I've been on the Mito train. I don't know why I would stop right now.
Yeah, I'm intrigued.
Striker, second shot. Why not?
And he's good. I mean, he fits that bill. We were talking about the approach numbers. Even though it hasn't been as good from a result standpoint for him, the irons haven't been a part of the problem over the last month or so for him. He's had a bulky putter. No. I mean, he's missed 4 straight cuts. So we have to sort of look at that, but it's not because of the iron play. It's been a struggle off the tee. It's been really bad on and around the greens for Mito. But like you said, this is a course that can kind of neutralize some of that. So his odds have fallen so far that, again, we don't have to pick him to win now. 6 months ago, you had to pick him to win to really get value out of him, because top 20s on him were getting you maybe 1.5 to 1 or 2 to 1. And now we can actually get some value and play him down the board and fill out some lineups with him. So I like the fact that you can now sort of buy low on Mito again after you were probably selling off a lot of that last fall Mito stock. We probably should have sold off around February. And now we can buy it back up and cash in all of our shares of who we cashing in from that we bought earlier. I'm trying to think of we can cash in all of our Sepp Straka stock and try and buy some Mito. Yeah.
He was playing a lot of golf and he was in the hunt. I mean, and playing a lot of stressful golf too through the summer. So, we knew it was going to come down a little bit at some point. Now, 4 straight missed cuts. That's a little alarming, but he did play a lot of golf through there. He's had some time off now to rest. Looks like 3 or 4 weeks, and he's going to come back. 130. I'll gobble that up a little bit, make the cut, make a run with the ball striking there. I think what's going to be interesting is the weather here. It's going to be some rain on Wednesday, maybe a little Thursday, probably soften things up a bit. But 87, 90, 88, 90, hot and humid in Memphis. I'm gonna add Mito to my card, as I've done many times here this summer in a top 20, and he's been good to me. So let's continue that. And Stallings, I think, is another one that I'm gonna stay with here too. I think Scott Stallings, as I re-pull up he's 130 to 1 right now as well. And you want to talk about good iron play? I mean, Scott Stallings can get it going with the irons, and he's been on a damn heater right now. I mean, the last 4 tournaments, he's all 4 inside the top 13.
Yeah,
fantastic
I'm
iron
right
play.
now.
Short game's been.
Yeah, I'm totally pot.
You like Stallings here too?
Yeah, I mean, at this point in time, it's like, chips in. Last week I had him on a win in a top 10, and he ended up T13. But the couple of weeks before that, I mean, if you were betting him, you can get Scott Stallings at plus money for a top 40 this week, which is kind of insane to think about how he's played. I mean, you can get him at plus 120 on a top 40 bet. I mean, that's better than trying to pick matchups, out of a hat when it comes to some of those guys. So, yeah, I just think that even against a good field this week, this is a guy that's playing golf that's worthy of being considered against some of the other guys, the big names. And so he gets driven down the board because the field is so big, but he's been playing golf at a top 30 sort of level, and he's not getting top 30 pricing. So I see that, and it's like, okay, that's a guy that has my attention.
I've been a fan of Smalley most of the year or all year really. And he's delivered. He missed the cut at the Rocket Mortgage. But outside of that, this last month and a half, he's been fantastic. Now, not a great field at the John Deere 16th, but a great field at the Scottish Open and finished 10th. That was impressive.
Yeah.
13th at the Wyndham last week. Another one of those guys that kind of, I think, tee to green, very good. His putter can get a little cold. Seems to be a little better as of late. I'm kind of a Smalley homer though. I haven't bet it yet, but I'm sure I will. In the top 20, there's Leishman 150. Nah,
no,
stay away from him.
He's going to have some distractions.
The same reason I'll stay away from Cameron.
Yeah.
There's that Denny McCarthy name again. I've been kind of touting. I've made the statement that McCarthy was going to win this year, and he's been close a couple times, but I don't think this is the place for McCarthy. Wyndham Clark, 150. Any names as we work down the board here that maybe we take a look at? Stuart Sink has had a good record here over the year. He knows how to get around. KH Lee, 200. As he restrike it back up. Caleb Taryn, he'll be on the podcast tomorrow. 200 to 1.
He fits the bill of somebody who is certainly has turned it around. I mean, from his last 20 compared to his season average, he is over a shot better in his last 20 rounds than he was the entire year on the PGA Tour. Now, he got off to a terrible start. He got shifted down to the bottom of the priority rankings in terms of it. From a course fit standpoint, for his size, pound for pound, he absolutely moves the golf ball. I mean, it's incredible how much power he generates. And while power can help you at some places here, I'd have to really dive into some of this a little bit more to kind of feel like where I am with him on this golf. I just don't feel like this is a golf course that necessarily takes advantage of his heater as much of a heater as he's been on of late, if that makes sense. So, but it's still like all around, it's been really good. There's been a lot to love about his summer. Putter's hot, confidence is sky high. He went from thinking he wasn't going to be able to get in the top 125 and keep his full card to now being here. This is kind of a gravy boat for him at this point in time. So I love that perspective. I love that his attitude has been really good throughout this entire journey to this moment. And so when I'm looking at this board, he's probably the only guy 200 to 1 and above that I'm like, I get kind of like, well, you know what? Chesson Hadley at 250 to 1 isn't a terrible play the way that he's been playing. Again, good golf. I'm not saying these guys are going to win, but those are odds that then I can extrapolate down into top 40 bets, or if I'm looking at, kind of crazy matchups or filling out DFS lineups. I think those two stand out in the crazy long shot category just because they've been playing at a different level of golf the last month compared to the rest of the season. And so you just ride the hot horse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could, it'll be interesting to listen to him tomorrow about the golf course and just I think he's 109th right now on the FedEx. So he's got to play well, right? To get inside the top 70.
Totally.
So he's playing for something. I kind of, people that listen to the podcast, they know I jump on Smalley a lot. I jump on Svensson a lot in top 20s, and he's been barking right there quite a bit as of late. He's a guy that can get really hot with his irons. I mean, he can stripe it with his irons, and his putter can get going too. So you give me the irons and the putter, I think this is a decent place for him, but look, my audience has heard that before as I've encouraged them to play top 20s, and he goes 21st at the RBC, 25th at the Travelers, 24th at the John Deere. That was
top 30, top 30.
That was a tough.
Let's go. Top 30s.
You want to talk about stressing for no reason. Like my wife, I was like, why are you so stressed out? I'm like, God,
because Spencer's going to
bogey. Spencer's now 25th.
Yeah.
hanging on these top 20s by one shot. Then he goes 6th at the Barbasol, 24th at the Mortgage. Anyway.
Like, you can't bet them all, Travis.
Like Spence.
We want to try and bet them all.
I mean, it doesn't feel like it feels like this. It's a tough field here. I mean, he's gonna have to do a little bit better around the greens. My goodness. Get the ball up and down one time, will you? Adam? Get the ball up and down. What is it with those guys up in Canada?
I like the faith that you have in a number of these players, but this is a different animal this week on this golf course against this field. And so I do think you're going to see a lot of cream rising to the top. I don't think a 3-digit guy on the board wins this golf tournament. So you're really just trying to squeeze out value. But the good thing is we've got some hot players that you can get value in 40-1, or sorry, in top 40 bets. So I think that's probably where I sprinkle.
Sure.
But again, like, it goes back full circle of this conversation. And, you know, I've got a lot of eyes on the Xanders and the Wills of the world getting this thing done when it's all said and done because of their skill set and where they are in the game of golf right now. So the rest of it is who's going to be that one name on the first page of the leaderboard when we flip on the TV on Sunday and be like, oh, he's having a good week. Not going to win the golf tournament. He's having a good week. That's the guy I want to get 6-1 on a top 10 or even 4-1 on a top 20 and be able to make some money on that guy.
Yeah, you made some money on Kim last week a little bit, but you know, I mean, it's been pretty close to the vest with Finau and Cameron Smith and Schauffele, Matthew Fitzpatrick, McIlroy, Sam Burns, Horschel. I mean, you know, I think those are the kind of names certainly that I think we'll see at the top of the leaderboard this week. But those are some top 40s in there. I like that. I think top 40 or top 20 rather. Henley, Grillo. I think it's a damn good pick there. I'm going to probably jump back on the Riley train as well. But as far as win tickets, I think Xander, awful tough. I like Will in the 22 range.
Yep.
I'll probably play Cameron Young again, and I'm going to play Hatton at 50. I think Hatton's a real name to look at here this week. He's playing his best golf right now.
Yep. Yeah, right. Short window too. I like the heater. Very short window heater.
Are your kids back to school yet?
Yeah, they are. In fact,
kids back to school yet?
I'm getting off of here to go pick them up. So I was telling you offline, we got to go get passports done, and it's a crazy scenario. I got to get an appointment at the post office, but the last one's at 3, so I got at the front of the pickup line. So it's great to have them back in school. I'm going to play more golf because of it, but there's still some of the madness that comes with having your kids back in school, especially the first week when you're trying to deal with parent pickup.
Let's go back tomorrow. Hallelujah! I'm celebrating.
Yes, that's what we need.
Will, thank you, man. Keep up the great work. Sirius XM Radio. Will Haskett. Go. Appreciate it.
See you, dude.